And thank you to the Strand. We support, small businesses over here. We love the Strand. Every time I go to New York, I always have to go. It is very iconic. Patti Smith used to work there. I mean, I don't know if any of you guys knew that. Crazy. And lastly, I want to thank Valentino. Obviously, I work in fashion as well, and Valentino is in support of the Strand and in small businesses. So not only did they dress me and I feel super chic right now, but they are also collaborating with the Strand because, like I said, there is a pandemic going on and businesses are struggling, and it's really unfortunate to see. So they teamed up with the Strand to make a little tote bag.
Love
This is
that.
very chic,
Need
and
that.
I'm a big every bookstore I go to, always have to get a little tote bag. And so Valentino collaborated with the Strand, which is really cool. Two avenues you would not expect to
Totally.
cross, and 100% of the proceeds that the bag, it goes back to the Strand and giving them more business, as we are trying to do in the midst of a pandemic.
Crazy. How are
Yeah.
you on this Wednesday? That was an amazing intro.
Thank you so much. I was just freeballing it over here.
I love it.
I'm great. I'm tired. I've had a crazy past 2 weeks, but trying to, in the best of my ability, make the most of it. And I'm sure everyone else can agree. Life is kind of crazy right now, but you got to see the positive, the silver lining, I guess.
Completely. How has it been releasing a whole ass book in during the global pandemic?
Listen, it is terrifying. Obviously everything is based on the internet right now, so it's so easy for everyone's trying to innovate ways to create or share their art in any sort of capacity, and the internet's the easiest way to do that right now because we can't see faces. And there is that fear of, releasing something and then it being forgotten about, and because the internet is filled with so much right now. But the overwhelming support I've received has completely overshadowed that fear of mine. And it was terrifying the first day, but now it feels just so great to say that I've written another book and that it's out in the world.
Totally. How did it compare to the first one? Like gearing up to releasing it. How'd you feel?
Oh, there was so much more work put in. My cat is staring at me, and I just know she's conspiring against me right now. It was so different. With the first book, I was obviously a rookie. I didn't really know what to expect. I kind of just went into it blindly. It was like going to release this thing, and there's the fear of being a first time writer, being taken seriously, and then also on top of everything I've written inside of it, in those moments and at that time, it was very personal to me. So it was scariest thing on earth. Whereas this time around, there was more hope. There was a blanket of, all right, this is gonna be fine. I mean, not to say that I wasn't terrified. I think I get scared even just posting a single poem on Instagram. So a book is completely a new realm. But I think it's so much, it is easier, weirdly enough, releasing something in a pandemic where everyone is kind of looking for some sort of comfort, and whether that be words or music or whatever it is, it has been wonderful to kind of create this space for people to live in my little world, even if it's just for a couple of hours of their day.
What I think is so beautiful about poetry, and I also think it's a big misconception about poetry, is that you read it and things can be so hyper specific. And at times you're kind of like, okay, if I include this little detail, how is this going to relate to the larger world? But then as a reader, when you're reading it and you can relate to those little tiny details, like when you're sleeping and the whiskey breath and those things, and they're visceral memories.
Right.
That's where I think it makes you realize that art is so universal. I'm reading your book and I'm seeing a poem that at the time when you're writing it, it's probably this is so specific to me, but I'm reading it being oh yeah, this reminds me of this breakup or this guy. But I'm sure as you're writing it, and you're putting those personal details, that's scary to then be like, okay, all these people are going to read this.
Yeah, yeah. It's so funny because there are so many moments where I'm like, I'll finish writing something and then I reread it to like kind of flesh things out because I'm like, I feel like I'm saying a lot with my own personal life, but and having some sort of like public platform, there
Mhm.
comes that, yeah, that uncertainty of being perceived in a way, you choose what to post online on your days.
Mhm.
Like, I could post on my story that I'm having coffee and reading a book, but that day in particular could be, I could be dealing with my own emotional turbulence in any sort of aspect of my life. So it's kind of, yeah, all at once, just giving the world this piece of my life that they hadn't, seen online. And I'm getting better. There are still times where I find myself hesitant to write some things or to share some things. But the beauty like of poetry and reading other writers, you are so involved in their lives and their stories, and that's
Mhm.
what makes them so wonderful and relatable, and why you are eager to read more from them. So I have to remind myself like this is just you signed up for this. You're a
Totally.
poet. Like do it.
How long did it take for you to get to a point where you're like, I'm a poet? Because like I find like I still can't say I'm a writer. I've been doing it for X. You know what I mean? It's just like a
Yeah.
weird thing to reconcile.
Uh, I I don't really know if there was like kind of like a turning point where I'm like I'm a poet, because I always tell people people are, they'll message me or they'll tweet at me or whatever, and like I'm an aspiring writer, I'm an aspiring poet, I'm working on something, and the word aspiring always bothers the hell out of me because I'm like,
Right.
you're writing, you are a writer. Like
Totally.
you're writing poetry, you are a poet. You're not aspiring to be anything. Like you're doing it. So like take that title and run with it, because that's what you're doing, and you should be proud of that. And obviously we all have goals and things that we strive for, but I think there is something to be proud of when you are sharing, your work with the world. And I think it took me a long time to, like, in my heart I knew that I was a poet and I knew that I was a writer, but there was again that hesitance of hoping others would take me seriously in that, because I didn't start off as that, when showing myself to the world.
Completely. Yeah, totally. With this book in particular, because it is so personal, but it's also so, it's not a poetry book, it's not a prose book, it's not a photography book. What was the starting point for you? Like, was there a photo you found or a poem that you had written that you're like, this is like kind of what's going to be the spark for this project?
Yeah, so I actually started Film for Her. It was an Instagram account at first,
Mhm.
and I didn't think it would turn into a book. I found my love for film photography as a late teenager, and I it wasn't anything that I like knew how to take serious, because I, didn't really know the tools of it all that much. I just knew how to hit a shutter button and hope for the best. And I would get these photographs back, and at that time, being a late teenager, being in my hometown, still working at a retail store, I couldn't, afford to just, not only is film expensive, but developing it and
Mhm.
getting that back also was another price tag to go along with it. So I felt it as though it was a sacred thing where I knew that if I was going to take a picture of something on film, it had to be something special to me, to preserve it for that I'm spending, my own money on. And I'd get the photographs back, and I would be confused because half of the photographs weren't as beautiful as it felt in that moment when
Right.
I was taking it. And so it was kind of like a reflection of, why did you take this photo? And I realized it had nothing to do with the beauty of my surroundings, but more of the memory that I felt attached to whatever moment I was living in at that time. So I created an account to share those pieces of my life. And it was, something, like I said, small, something I didn't really take serious, but I'd post a photograph, and along with it, the caption would be some sort of story to bring the readers and my followers into that particular snapshot of my life. And I realized how much everyone seemed to enjoy it as much as I did, because, my job is curating things and making things look beautiful, and having, like, yeah, the most cultivated parts of my life, whereas this side project wasn't about that, it was about the
Mhm.
message. And so I had a lot of fun doing it. And so not only did I have a lot of fun, but I had, by the time I'd been doing this for years, and this Instagram account had been accumulating photographs, I was like, I have so much that I can just throw on this account, or I can just make a book. And um, yeah, with Flux, my first book, it was kind of focused really in on one certain feeling.
Right.
And Film for Her was a collection of moments throughout my life where I wasn't really honing in on one feeling. And so I felt it was appropriate for the time, where, you know, my life wasn't subjected to one emotion,
Hmm.
to just kind of share it all.
Completely. How did you organize it like you did? Because I find that so interesting that it is so many emotions and different times in your lives, but it feels really cohesive still. So how did you kind of make it one cohesive package in the end?
It was really hard. I think my brain was battling on two sides, the side of like, keep it, you know, from the root of how it started. And it could be, a very mundane photo and
Mhm.
attach it to something great. And then the other part of my brain where I am on work mode and I'm like, okay, make it beautiful and make like, I guess, really was, it's easy to assume when growing up on the internet and having a sort of platform, it's easy to already pre-assume what others are going to assume of you. And
Mhm.
so I feared like, oh gosh, like the photographs aren't good, and I think people are gonna think that I'm some sort of, photographer, and this is like
Right.
my best work yet. And I'm not Robert Mapplethorpe. I'm not Helmut Newton by any means, but um there was this back and forth battle in my head, but at the end of the day, I think it really ultimately came down to going through my archive of photographs and really looking at each one. And if some sort of story appeared with that in my head that, brought me back to that moment, it was very
Mhm.
easy for me to just like grab that photo and say, all right, work at this photo, look at it, and then create or write your story or write
Right.
your piece of prose about it.
Were there any pictures you came across that you were surprised had like such a distinct memory that you like had totally like confined to one part of your brain and were surprised to like have it back?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of the photos that I had taken in like 2016, 2017. Um, those are, it feels like such a hazy time in my life that I can't really remember too many details because I was consumed with, heartbreak. And it was funny though, looking back on the photographs and not feeling heartbreak
Yeah.
from those photographs. I felt, other moments in my life that I had heartbreak had completely drowned out in those times. So looking back at those photographs, really like set this like tone for me where I'm like, wow, I missed out on like so much because I was so focused on this one feeling. And it's great that I documented that time in my life to
Mhm.
write about it.
Completely. I also find that's so great about poetry in particular is when you write it and you feel like such emotion that you're like, I will always feel this way when I read these words. And then at one point you
Mhm.
look at it and you're like, I remember it vaguely. It's like a phantom ache, but it's not that like
Yeah.
searing pain or searing joy I had at that one point in time, which is kind of just like it really is like a small testament to like the human psyche of like what's
Yeah.
going on.
It's no, that's it 1,000%. Like anytime I don't ever really pick up Flux, my first book. But I obviously some people still are purchasing it and posting photographs of it, and it is so insane to me that I had written that at such a tumultuous time in my life. Well, I had thought it was tumultuous. I literally felt like it was the end of the world. And I'm reading it now and I'm like, God, if you only
Oh,
knew how much great life would get after this. And it's so crazy, but those, words, they live on, and they never die. And people will still, tweet at me and say, I read Flux and I'm going through a heartbreak right now and this really helped me. And I'm like, that is insane that those words can carry on still with such emotion in a way that doesn't affect me anymore, but can affect others.
totally. Do you keep a journal?
I do. Certainly.
Are you good? Like,
Yeah.
are you? Because my New Year's resolution this year was to keep a journal, just because I feel like you look back on these times, and I'm like, I want to like remember like how I felt this day, and like when I look back, be like, oh yeah, wasn't that such a big a deal?
Oh,
And then
yeah.
March like 13th came around, and I was like, well, I'm writing the same thing every single day, so
Oh, yeah, yeah. No, this past year, actually, I have been so bad about writing in my journal, and it's so funny because I'll revisit my journal like maybe every 2 months, and then I started off with like, I haven't written in a while, but let me fill you in on my life.
Totally.
Where I used to write every single day in my journal, and it is something that I've been neglecting, and I really regret doing, and I hope to like clear my mind and pick that back up again. But it is so crazy and interesting. Like even like in January and February of this year, the things that I was writing about, certain people in my life that certainly are not in my life anymore. And
Completely.
I had felt that it was, yeah, this end of the world feeling. And also this kind of blanket of hope that I was like, I'm gonna have like the best year ever.
Totally.
Girl, we had a pandemic. So I don't
Totally.
know about that.
Well, so I started
Um,
keeping a journal just because I was like, I've been in the city for almost 10 years now, and it all seems like a blur in my mind. At a certain point, the
yeah.
all blend together, like the fun times. So I was like, if I write every day, I'll have this journal of it. But then when lockdown started, I was like, what's the point of writing? Like, I watched this TV show today.
Right,
It's like
right.
sad soup. But now that I haven't written in it in 6 months, I'm like, this is a time that I kind of do want to know what I was doing because
Right. No,
myself
exactly.
looking, I'm like, how is it fucking December? What did I do all year?
Yeah, no, I think the same thing. I had saw somebody recently had, kept a journal of what they did throughout quarantine, and they were reading it back, and I was like, God, I wish so badly I did that, because outside of like how boring the days were when you are locked into your house, and I live alone, so I really only had me and my cats. Um I I still was dealing with my own set of emotions, and there were days that were not as great as others, and I wish so badly that I can, like, for example, Spotify Wrapped.
Okay, that's obviously on my
Okay,
list of topics to
right.
talk about.
Right. Spotify Wrapped recently came out, and so I did my due diligence, and I did, checked it,
Mhm.
and my most streamed song was "Everything Is Embarrassing" by Sky Ferreira.
Okay.
Cool. And then it was like, "You streamed this over 100 times." I'm like, "Word, this song came out so long ago. What was I going through?" And then it was like, "On April 21st, you streamed this song like 50 times." And I'm like, "What happened on April
Dude,
21st that I needed to listen to this song 20 times?" So I remembered. This is like my only form of like, I don't have a journal, so like let me go back and figure it out. I was like, I go through my photos, and I'm like, what was happening on April 21st? There wasn't really many photos to account for. And then I was like, I was kind of seeing someone at this time. Like, I wonder what our text messages were like on April 21st. Oh, I went and checked. He ignored me for an entire day
yeah.
and like ghosted me basically. And so I was just like this bucket of emotions all day that I felt the need to listen to this song over 50 times.
Yep.
And I would have known that had I written down in my journal. But thank you,
Completely.
Spotify Wrapped, for reminding me.
Spotify Wrapped with those dates read us dry because my most played song was Motion Sickness by Phoebe Bridgers, which is now the fourth time
Oh,
running. And I was like, interesting.
pain.
I was like, I thought I had my shit kind of together this year. And then it was like most played day, November 15th. And I was like, ah, yes, that's when I broke up with the guy I was seeing. So
Yeah,
that brought
you're
it
like,
back.
it makes sense. That was the
Totally.
cue. Yeah. It called us out for sure, and we have to thank Spotify for our
Really embrace it.
yeah, noting that down in our journal. Maybe it's probably for the better, but good to know.
Good to know. Well, I want to talk about music anyways. I love this playlist that you had made for the book.
Oh,
Was
thank
that
you.
what you were listening to when you were writing it, or is that like the music that like is the vibe of kind of the book?
So it's kind of a mix. I started the playlist while I was writing the book, but all of the classical music scores
Mhm.
were all songs that I was listening to while writing. I can't listen to any sort of music with
Mm.
lyrics in it while I'm writing because I'll be easily distracted. So everything that has like a score and there isn't, any lyrics in it were times while I was writing the book.
Mhm.
And then I kind of went back and just added music that felt, would fit the
Mhm.
emotion or, whatever feeling that the book entails. So yeah, kind of a mix of the two.
Totally. What or well, give me your top 5 from your Unwrapped or your Wrapped.
Oh no, okay. Oh wait, my top 5 artists or
Top 5
songs?
artists or both. I mean, let's hear it. This is a
Oh my God,
safe space, so like no
this
judgment.
is safe. This is safe.
Yeah.
Okay. what's sad about this is that my top 5 songs are 5 really sad songs. So
Oh, I exclusively listen to sad music.
girl
Lay
is
it
going
on.
through it this year, and I'm, not ashamed to admit it. Okay, number 1 was Everything Is Embarrassing by Sky
Right.
Ferreira. Number 2 was Right Side of My Neck by Faye Webster.
Uh-huh.
3, Supermodel by SZA.
Uh-huh.
4, Cinnamon Girl by Lana Del Rey. And 5, Cherry by Harry Styles.
Solid. That's a solid
What's
list.
happening? And my
Right.
top artists were Lana Del Rey, Taylor Swift, Faye Webster, Florence and the Machine, and I'm it's embarrassing, Drake. Like
Oh, all right. Totally fine. Yeah, Taylor Swift was my number 1 too. It was like Taylor Swift, Phoebe Bridgers, Fiona Apple, Bright Eyes.
ugh.
So it was like, oh, you are depressed.
Yeah, something's going on, and
Like, yeah, it's the world.
I'm like my therapist, like she took a break too, so like I don't know what to tell
I
you
had
guys.
to turn to Spotify.
Yeah.
Totally. What have you been listening to a lot like recently?
Oh my gosh. I think right now, it being a slower pace of life, I've been just listening to a lot of Mazzy Star.
Mhm.
Um, I feel like is what's coming to top of mind. That's what I'm gonna go with because I know there's definitely more, but it was Folklore by Taylor Swift, and then now I'm right back to my Mazzy Star train.
Solid. You have to like go for like comfort food. Like I like find that I'm just like comforted by things that like I know will be like a good hit. Like I find like I have a hard time getting into new TV shows when I'm trying to like binge something. Like I just
Oh
like go
yeah.
back and rewatch it all the time.
Yeah. Oh my god, absolutely. God, it's like the things that I've been watching lately too is just we're getting bored over here. Things are
Oh yeah.
happening.
I'm like, okay, maybe like it's time to like I'm like going to a dark place. I'm like, should I watch 19 seasons of Grey's Anatomy?
You're like, should I do this again? Who's gonna stop me? No one's gonna stop me. I've been watching. Okay, I'm unashamed to admit this, but I am a big fan of the Bachelor franchise.
Okay. I mean, hello, yes. Tasha
It was
Tuesday.
it started off on accident. It was an accidental thing that happened 2 years ago, and here I am sucked into it.
You get sucked in so dry. But the thing about The Bachelor and The Bachelorette is it's like the perfect topic. It's like talking about weather with people. When we used to like have to go outside and make small talk with people, you'd be like,
Yeah.
oh, the weather. Oh,
Right.
who are you rooting for?
The Bachelorette. I mean, the
Totally.
best thing about it is like I'm great at balancing things. You know, one night I'm watching The Bachelorette, the next night I'm watching a movie on Criterion. So like we have to
Exactly.
just
It's a balance.
balance it out. Yeah.
Totally. It's Taylor and then Lana. So it's like all about
You just have to balance it out.
totally. Have you been able to write in quarantine?
Yeah. Oh. I have, and it has been funny actually. It's funny to look back at it because I kind of went through, you date people in quarantine or try to attempt to.
Mhm.
So it's funny to see like the poems from like February
When
to
you're like starting
June.
to talk and you're like,
Yeah, they're all
totally.
happy, like,
Uh-huh.
oh, the moonlight in your face. And then you get from like July to October and it's like, fuck you. Uh,
Completely.
not to that extent, but it has been amazing to see the change of speed, but not just, about my own outside relationships, but even just like myself. I think there's a lot that I've learned about myself in the time that I've spent alone and reading a lot. I finally got a bookshelf to,
Incredible.
accompany all of my books. And so I've been reading a lot and understanding more about myself and listening to podcasts and all the fun things. And so yeah, your perspective changes and you find that your writing's a bit different than usual.
Completely. What have you been reading that you're loving?
Oh my God. Well, my favorite book that I read during quarantine was My Year of Rest and Relaxation. I think I talked about that so many times. So good. Right now I'm going to grab it on my shelf. I've been reading The Ways of Seeing by John
Okay.
Berger. And it is just about, it is really it's very informational,
Mhm.
just about your perspective in the way that, you see it. It mostly talks about paintings and photographs, but it
Mhm.
gives you kind of like that perspective and how you perceive like other things in your life. So this was recommended to me by a very intellectual person in my life, and so it's been interesting.
Good. Do you ever read and get like writer envy?
All the time, like
Right?
almost I think every single time that I
Right.
read. um yeah.
It's like the
Yeah.
biggest like imposter syndrome in the world. I just read, have you read Luster?
No.
It's amazing. And it's just like the prose is like so good. And I'm kind of like, what am I doing with my life? Like this is not what happens when I like sit down and type out words. Like they
No,
come like this.
exactly. Well, that is the beautiful thing about, I guess, my how I begin writing, whether it is for a book or I'm just, writing on my own. I try to make sure at least to dedicate 30 minutes to reading something before I write. And it doesn't have to be a book. It could be like a New York Times article, or there's a website called Brain Pickings that I really love. And just kind of just set my brain in the mood of, I'm going to be writing, but
Mhm.
also it is interesting to, yeah, see other people's perspective and how they word things, and how, their brain works. And sometimes if you're lucky, you read something and then it makes you think of something that is drawn close to your own life, and you're able to write about it. And so I always dedicate, yeah, at least 30 minutes to read before I start writing.
That's that's interesting because I feel like sometimes for me, I'm like I don't want to read because I'm afraid it'll
Yeah.
influence me or like intimidate me too much. So I think that's a
Yeah.
very healthy way of thinking about it.
Yeah. No, it can be intimidating for sure. I think anytime I read Eve Babbitt's,
Hmm.
I am like, your brain, woman, I want to be you. You're so cool, and she's so like degaff when she writes. Like it's as almost as if she's like fully like writing, like retelling a story to a clone of herself.
Right.
And I love that because it's so easy to hold back some moments or some scenarios for the sake of your own self,
Yeah, totally.
fear, reputation of others. Obviously, I'm not going to write an expose, but I would love to. Um, so yeah, anytime I read Eve Babbitt's, I'm like, yes, yes. I'm
Completely.
jealous, but yes.
It's such an interesting thing because I think even if you sit down and you write in your head and like your heart of hearts, you're kind of like, this is just for me. No one will see this. There's still like that outside of like, what would people think if they saw this? Blah, blah. So that's, I think, one of the really cool
Right.
things about writing
Yeah.
when it comes to like writing about your personal self.
Yeah. And also just like, it's funny because I forget that I have family that want to support my
Right.
work. And then it's like when everything's done and they're like, "Oh, like where can I buy your book?" I'm like, "Oh, I
Right.
forgot that like you guys would
Totally.
potentially read this stuff." I didn't let my dad. I gave my dad a copy of my first book, and I specifically wrote in it, and I was like, yeah, like, don't read this. I love you, but don't read this. And he didn't, which is a beautiful
That's
thing. Like, good for
very,
you for
yes.
like respecting me. But then I gave him a copy of Film Her, and I wrote, and I was like, okay, fine, you could read
You can
this.
read all this.
Yeah, so it is that fear of like also just personal people in your life that know you, but not know you enough to really understand what you were going through.
Totally. Do you ever have people reach out to you and be like, is this about me? And it's like, totally not.
No, but
Okay.
I have on some like really toxic occasions where you know, I've had a glass of wine or two,
Mhm.
screenshot something that I've written and send it to somebody and say, "Hey, like, oops, did this to me." So,
That's crazy.
yeah, I've done that probably twice in my life, and luckily, it they didn't completely hate me afterwards. They were just like, "Okay, cool, nice."
At
I
that point,
guess.
it's more for you than them.
Right, right. I have been a bit, well, with, I guess, Film for Her, it is a collection of like so many people
Mhm.
in my life that I think it would be hard to pinpoint. And also, I don't think I don't know. I'm willing to bet maybe one day I'm gonna get a text saying like, "Yo, picked up the book. What's this about?" And be like, "Oh, you know what it's about. You know."
Totally. Hold on. Let's open up to Q&As before
Okay,
we
beautiful.
wrap. Okay, the first one is from Christian. When you write or photograph, do you have a certain method of deciding what's worth being written down or what's worth being taking pictures of, or do you just go for it?
At this point in my life, I just go for it. I used to like really like I said, it was something that I couldn't afford to do so freely all the time. So now it's easy to just go for it, which is like it is a privilege to say and a privilege to be able to do because I'm able to document so much more of my life and it's I'm very proud of, I think with Film for Her, I stopped taking photographs in November. So last November, I stopped taking photographs, and in the past year, I have taken so much more. That yeah, I'm just proud that I have the privilege and honored to have that privilege to be able to do that, and yeah, it's much easier, I guess, that way.
Makes sense. The next one, hold on, I'm gonna hit this answer live and see what popped. I think like it'll maybe not. This one I'm actually curious about because when I was reading the book, the question from Jasmine is, do you think temporarily living in Paris has influenced some of the poems? Which I was really interested in when I was reading, like, you have, well, obviously you're a California girl now and you have that,
Yeah.
like your poems, like they had a distinct vibe, I feel like when they're about California or the ones like about your
Mhm.
time in New York and
Yeah.
then Italy. And so tell me how you kind of captured that, like the places you are in words.
So there is, I guess, there is this romanticization of being in Paris as a writer alone. And that I've never experienced before. So not only was I so far removed from my own home and I was in a place that did not belong to me, but I was also really truly alone in the sense that I don't really speak French, unfortunately, as much as I would love to. And I don't know anyone in Paris. I know about two people and they work full-time jobs, so I couldn't hang out with them all the time. And so I made the decision to go for that reason alone because I was like, there's going to be zero distractions, like do your thing. And so there is this almost, I feel like with Paris, there's this longing that hovers above my words, whereas in California, there's this security where I am around people I love. And if I am going through something, nobody's a 9-hour time difference away or, of that sort. And like I said, the romanticization of being like some sort of poet in Paris. And I had recently been introduced to so many French poets that I never really gave the chance to read into. So there was, yeah, this almost like expectation for myself to try to channel that
Mm-hmm.
greatness in any way that I could, that I didn't really experience in California. And I think that, obviously, if we do see the light of day in this world again and the borders are open, that I would love to continue to do that with my work, to just, it doesn't have to be Paris, but remove myself from like my own home to,
Mm-hmm.
challenge whatever it is that I want to channel.
Completely. You kind of get to live that fantasy, but then when you're confronted with the fact that you're living the fantasy, you have to like actually do the shit you went there to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally. This person wants to know, Sabrina wants to know if you'd ever move back to New York, and if New York were a poem, what would it be?
Oh, would I? It's so funny because I love New York so much. I actually woke up this morning thinking about New York, in the sense where I was just like, it's so easy for me to spend my entire day at home and like, do nothing here. Whereas in New York, the convenience of being able to walk down the street to a coffee shop like right there is something that like really got me out of bed in the morning and it made me like excited to like leave my house, even if it was
Mm-hmm.
just momentarily. Would I move back to New York? Probably yes. But I had this like weird hate for, not hate, but like um I think my love for California it was really strong that it like kind of fizzled out my love for New York. And I wrote about it in Film for Her where I had went back to New York for a fashion week. And I really don't know if it was because New York was so cold and I was so stressed out while I was
Mhm.
there, or, I wasn't happy with who I was surrounded by. But I kind of, wrote something about maybe I don't miss New York. I had thought, when I moved here that I would be back almost immediately and it would be something that I would regret.
Mhm.
And I had went back for the first time since and it was freezing outside and I just some of the people I were around just weren't my type of people. And so
Mhm.
I was like, maybe like I don't know. Right now I'm happy with my life here. I have an apartment that I love. I have all of my friends here and it almost feels like I've made like some sort of like little family and
Mhm.
I would love to give New York another chance because obviously didn't spend as much time living there as I have here. So maybe
Mhm.
who knows?
Great. Well, you're welcome back anytime. I'm
Got
apparently
it.
the ambassador for New York.
Yeah.
Kava wants to know what was the biggest lesson you learned about yourself when you were writing film for her?
Oh, the biggest lesson I learned is probably, I guess, pacing out my feelings. And that's probably has to do with going to therapy, but also writing and growing up and learning more about yourself. I think it's very easy for me to be angry about a lot of things that happen in my life that don't work out in my favor.
Mhm.
Um, and when writing this book, there were certain topics that I had every single right to be angry over. And when I went down to write it, I found myself understanding it rather than coming at it with such angst. And so yeah, I guess one thing I discovered about myself is that it is okay to like, yeah, pace out your feelings and you don't have to take the first emotion that you have and run with it. And even if you do, that's fine. Like you're entitled to feel however you want to feel.
Mhm.
But I think, yeah, trying to, I guess, understand the root of why you're so upset can help you flesh out that much easier and come from a more understanding way of looking at things.
Mhm. Completely. Quincy wants to know, this is a great question. Is there pressure to be sad as a poet or writer? And then how is it easier to write about happy or sad moments?
I think there is a pressure. There's this pressure, I guess, amongst poets that you have to kind of be this mysterious
Mhm.
entity who doesn't really say much, who is sad, is very emotional, be your Edgar Allan Poe, whatever. And yeah, to kind of be this mysterious being. And that's was so difficult for me to kind of handle over, the past 4 years of my life where I found myself kind of watering my own self down to be
Mhm.
some sort of like mysterious entity and like only kind of going on the internet sometimes and like tweeting ominous things.
Uh-huh.
And not to say that that wasn't me, like, or that I was like trying to be someone I wasn't, but I think I was, yeah, watering myself down and only giving, I guess, what was expected of me. Whereas I'm way far past that now. Like people are so incredibly dimensional. It's like you can have different sides of you and it doesn't make, your more artsy deep side any less deep just because you can, be your fun great self.
Totally.
So that was definitely something. But as far as writing, I think it's so much, obviously it's easier to write when you're sad because you think it's the end of the world, like every single
Completely.
time. Like you're like, okay, well, this is the end. But it's so funny, I guess, with writing film for her was a lot of it isn't, I mean, there are sad moments in it, but a lot of it are happy moments. And I had felt that I was giving so much of a disservice to the people in my life that do show me love,
Mhm.
um, that I couldn't do that. And so, yeah, I felt like I was giving a disservice in those aspects. And I was like, no way, like I have to fully hone in on this and hone in on the happiness and the good parts of my life because those are just as important, if not more, than like the times that are very fleeting where I'm feeling this emotion for like a momentary time and whatever. Um and it's so crazy, the older you get, you think you've felt it all.
Mhm.
And you realize that You don't. Like, I recently have experienced, like, a death in my life, and that is a different type of heartbreak that I've ever experienced before. Um, and I was telling my friends, I was like, "God, like, I thought, my one breakup that this, like, really bad breakup I had was, like, the end all be all of my life." Like, at that time, I was like, "God, it feels like I lost a limb." But, dealing with life and death, that's, like, a whole different type of heartbreak that you're not prepared for, you know? And so it is very interesting that you're just kind of always experiencing new things the older you get.
Absolutely. Colleen wants to know how your hometown in Georgia plays a role in your life and in your work, which also is a big part of the book.
Yeah. I'm at a place in my life now where I am, I don't agree with a lot of the things that go on in my hometown. I'm really not friends with most people there. It's just a very different life than what I live now, and very different set of values. But I had obviously spent my entire life being ashamed of that, and being surrounded by people who I just could not relate to in any sense.
Hmm.
But when you move away and your parents still live there and you go back to visit home, there is this nostalgia tied to it where it's like I feel bad for being ashamed of something that grew me into the person I am today, and talking about my parents and my life growing up. And I don't think there'll ever be a time in my life where I'll move back, or a time in my life where I will, ride for my hometown through and through. But I think there is a sort of appreciation that I can have and express where, you know, it was a part of me at one point in my life, and I want to document that because it is important, and it is something that I love and cherish. And every time I go back home, I'm reminded of that.
Completely. There's a few people on here who are wondering, who are poets themselves, and wondering what the first steps would be if they want to kind of embark on taking it to the next step, whether it's, publishing or writing a book. So what do you think is like a good starting place for, like, taking it to that next level?
Yeah, I think, I mean, from my own experience, it doesn't hurt to share your stuff on the internet. I know that can be a very scary thing. It's a very intimate thing, but I was very lucky, and I will always, attest for this, that I have the privilege of, I was able to share my work, and it got around, and a publisher reached out to me, and that's not ever always going to be the case.
Hmm.
But that being said, I prior to that was going to self-publish, and I have many friends that do self-publish, and I always ask them questions about it. And you don't need to have like this huge platform, even if you aren't posting or decide to post or share whatever it is that you decide to do. You don't need to have this massive platform to make something. I think as long as your heart is in it and you give yourself your own deadlines, and like actually, because it's so easy to say I'm working on a book, and if nobody's holding you accountable, like you'll take years to do it. Setting deadlines for yourself is so important. And maybe even telling a few people in your life that you want to do something, so they kind of hold you accountable. They're waiting on whatever it is that you want to do. There's so many programs online that can make self-publishing very easy.
Hmm.
And I think it's easy to assume that like you have to throw in so much money for it, but I think there are programs out there that can take that part away, and still make the dream come alive. And um DM, like, I read my DMs all the time, and reading other people's poems, sharing them. You don't have to, even if you don't want to directly post them, you can
Hmm.
share them with other people, or other writers, and see if that can go anywhere, I guess.
Is it still scary for you to post your poems online? Like, do you
Yeah.
ever get over that?
No, I think it's scarier to post a poem online than it is to release a book, because yeah, somebody could buy my book and hate it, and they can live with that thought in their head, and like I won't ever know. And whereas like if I post a poem on Instagram, I can get a comment that says, "Oh, like this kind of sucks," and I'm like, "Why? Why? No, no, don't say that." So it's definitely harder to post things, but uh, it's I guess now I'm at a place where like those insecurities don't like really hover above me anymore with such
Right.
shame, because I'm like, I love it. I know that I did the best that I could, and I'm growing, and I'm obviously, you could only keep growing. And So I want to share it.
Great. Emily and a few other people are wondering how the title Film for Her came up. I know it was the Instagram first, but how did that kind of become the book title?
You know, everyone asks who she is, who is her, and who is she? And she is no one. And I had read I think it was like a poem years ago, and one of the lines said it said like uh magnolias for her, or not magnolias, it was some sort of flower. And I had thought that it was like the most beautiful line I'd ever read. And so when I was, coming up with something for my film account, I was just like, film for her sounds beautiful. And her isn't, I guess I always look at her as some sort of entity. It could be it could be a lover, it can be yourself, it can be a city or an emotion that you felt. It's whatever you want it to be.
Love that. Ashton has a good question, which is, how has kind of growing up on social media impacted your perspective and your work? And do you look at your old social media and kind of like see that as growth, or is it like so great?
No, oh my God. I think I can look back. Yeah, I don't look back at anything I used to do because it is cringy. I started off on the internet as a 16, 17-year-old kid living in my hometown. Just a lot of it can be very cringy and things I wouldn't necessarily say or do today, but it is sweet to look back sometimes and just see how much fun I was having on the internet as a kid. And but I think that the same goes with writing as well. Like sometimes I won't look back at Flux because there can be an emotion that, or a piece that felt so, I'm going to use immature for lack of a better word. But yeah, emotions, and I guess the way that I had felt things felt very immature when I read back at it now. And I'm sure I'm going to think the same in 4 years when I read back at this. But if that's the case, then at least you know that you're growing and you're improving in some sort of way. And that's not to say that I hate everything that I like. I don't loathe Flux, and I'm not going to loathe Film for Her.
Right.
It is just something to reflect on and say, wow, like would have said it differently, or maybe gone into it more in some sort of other aspect. But that's growth, baby.
Right. But also, like, imagine looking at something you wrote 10 years ago and be like, that was perfect. Like,
yeah, right.
That's probably not the healthiest thing either.
Yeah. No, so one time, I think very few occasions, I would look back at like old archived Tumblr posts that I'd written, and I was like, did I plagiarize this? Like, why is it kind of good? Like, I was like, was I like 15 and just like pulling from someone? Like, this is weird. Right. And it's very rare that happens where I'm like, okay, girl, like you were onto something.
Totally. Someone, I just lost their name. Well, Michaela wants to know what your favorite camera and film to shoot on is.
Oh gosh. Okay. My favorite film is Portra 400 film. Duh. I have a few film cameras. I don't have any behind me. I usually have them over here. I have been shooting with a Konica Hexar. It's a bit pricey. That was like one camera where I was like, treat yourself. But like my go-to camera was like one that I found at Goodwill for $15, a little point and shoot. It's a Fujifilm. I really don't remember the name of it. It's in all of my photos. But yeah, just like a little cheap point and shoot. Those are so much fun to shoot with. And I also just treated myself, because when I had bought like that like really nice camera, it was probably like 3 years ago, when I was like, I want to start writing a book with film. I want to get like a really cool camera to like attest to this. So now years have passed, and I'm like, I want to get better and I want to learn more. So I'd recently just bought this medium format camera, and I've never shot on medium format. This is something insane.
So
this looks scary to me.
Totally.
So yeah, I'm typically used to shooting on 35 millimeter, whereas now I'm trying to up my hand and try to teach myself a little more. We have so much time right now. Like I might as well teach myself something.
Yeah, totally. Mariah is wondering, how do you feel your online persona affects your identity as an author? Which I think is really interesting, because obviously it's important, I think, that you do online persona, because we're all putting on some kind of something on Instagram or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I mean, of course, on Instagram, I think the difference is my Instagram is, like I said, very beautiful moments of my life. It's the fashion weeks. It's the things in my home that I like made sure to look really good,
Yeah.
or sharing like a cute thing my cat is doing or whatever. Whereas that's this persona of like life is great, life is beautiful, don't you worry
Mhm.
about it. Whereas when you come into my world as an author, you see the like less beautiful sides of things,
Mhm.
where I am really depressed. I talk about, people that have like fucked me over, or being depressed, like beyond
Totally,
life
it's your
support.
darkest moments. Yeah.
Yeah, like, so those are, and that is a bit scary because those are some things I don't talk about online, with, going to therapy now and taking antidepressants and trying to understand myself more and more. There's that big difference because I don't think you would look at my Instagram and see sad girl whatever. But if you take a look into my work, you definitely see that. And um, there was, like I said, there was like this kind of like identity crisis that I had of trying to appear more mysterious than I actually am. Whereas like I grew up on YouTube, and if anyone knows me, I'm like so far from that. I, love to joke around and have my fun. So it was something that I used to deal with a lot more than I do now. I'm very secure in myself in the sense, which that was a hard hurdle to jump over. But yeah, it is definitely just kind of understanding how to show up as yourself in the best way you can, and be honest about that.
Completely. This is a little bit more lighthearted, but it made me laugh. It's from an anonymous.
Yeah.
Did you watch Emily in Paris, and was your experience like hers?
I didn't watch it.
Oh my God. You
I didn't watch it. I love Lily Collins so much. She's so hot. Like I
so
love her.
gorgeous. Yeah.
But I just heard so many bad things about it, so I, like, didn't wanna, like, waste my time and watch it, which I'm so sorry if anyone thought it was good. I can't give a real opinion because I've never seen it. So I have yeah, no.
I
I
mean,
know.
if you get into like real like something to watch, it's there. Um,
There she is.
think we are have to wrap it up, but I know a lot of people are kind of asking kind of what is next, and if like you think about writing nonfiction, directing, do you think about things about like what's next? You have a list?
Yeah, I have so many things I wanna do, and I just don't know where to start. I'm, like, already thinking about my 3rd book right now. I'm like, "Do I write just another book of poetry,
Mhm.
or do I" the beautiful thing about Film for Her is that it is, something that could be made into volumes. So I'm
Mhm.
like, "Do I extend into a volume 2 for the next thing?" Like I said, I'm kind of working on understanding film photography more, and, it's something that I wanna take more serious, that like shooting other women, and do I want to do a book of photography? There's like so many things that I have in mind. And of course, like when I'm much older, I guess my two biggest goals are to be some sort of Sophia Coppola and like write a
Like,
film. Yeah, direct a film in some way. Or when I'm a mother, I would love to write children's books. Like I have this entire, like right up here, you can't see it. I have an entire shelf of just children's books that I've like collected for my future kids and to kind of get inspiration off when I'm older. So yeah.
love that. Exciting. Well, I think that's our time.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank
Oh,
you guys for coming. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Orion. I love chatting with you always.
Oh, so good. I appreciate everyone, and thank you, Strand, for having us. This is like it really is such an honor. Like it's so cool to be part of this in any way.
well, thank you both so much. And like thank you for being agile with the technical difficulties and switching over to Zoom. And thank you to the audience who joined us. And thank you for a wonderful night. This was a fantastic event.
Oh, I
Thank you.
loved it. Yeah.
Thank you to
I'll
the
see you guys all on the internet. We'll see you there.
Good night.
Bye. Have a
Bye.
good night, everyone.